Hello brothers and welcome to Sigma Old Man channel. The quieter you become, the more you can hear. Ram Dass. But what happens when you hear too much? Every fake laugh, every ego trip, every recycled opinion trying to pass for wisdom. That's when intelligent Sigmas start ghosting the world with no return ticket. Here's a fact that'll twist your brain a little. Studies show the smarter you are, the less social interaction you actually need to feel fulfilled. Sounds backwards, right? But for Sigmas, it's not just a preference, it's survival. While everyone else is out networking, small-talking, and pretending to enjoy group selfies, the Sigma is quietly building an empire, in peace. So why do intelligent Sigmas really hate socializing? Not the cute, quirky reasons people throw around. The real reasons, the brutally raw, rarely spoken truths that make you realize they're not antisocial. They're just allergic to nonsense. Let's get into it. But fair warning, if you worship small talk or need constant validation, you might want to sit this one out. Number one, they can't stand people who broadcast their personality. There's something deeply off-putting about people who treat their personality like a performance. The ones who walk into a room and instantly switch on this exaggerated, hyper-edited version of themselves as if they're auditioning for the role of most interesting human alive. Intelligent Sigmas can spot it a mile away and they're already calculating the nearest exit. To them, this kind of personality broadcasting is exhausting, not just to witness, but to tolerate. It feels fake, forced, and loud in all the wrong ways. Sigmas don't play that game. They don't need to sell you a brand. They are who they are, whether anyone's watching or not. So when someone constantly needs to announce their hobbies, flex their intelligence, or shout their uniqueness from the rooftops, it doesn't feel like connection. It feels like marketing. And Sigmas don't do well with ads, especially the human kind. What makes it worse is that these people aren't even aware they're performing. They genuinely think being quirky or unfiltered is authenticity, when in reality, it's usually a curated act built on applause and attention. Intelligent Sigmas can see straight through it. They can tell when someone's personality is built on borrowed phrases, recycled tweets, and TikTok therapy buzzwords. That kind of surface-level persona might impress a crowd, but it does absolutely nothing for a Sigma. If anything, it repels them. The sad part is most of these performers are so busy being on that they never pause long enough to become self-aware. They mistake being loud for being memorable, and Sigmas, who value stillness, depth, and inner clarity, want nothing to do with it. They don't want someone who's busy broadcasting. They want someone who's actually listening, thinking, feeling, quietly, genuinely, and without a need for applause. When a person constantly feels the need to prove who they are, it screams insecurity to a Sigma. And nothing makes a Sigma back away faster than someone who's addicted to external validation. They're not impressed by how many people someone knows, how many jokes they crack, or how fun they appear in a crowd. They care about what's behind all that, if there's anything there at all. Sigmas aren't antisocial. They just have a zero-tolerance policy for artificial people trying too hard to be seen. They don't need you to perform. They just need you to be real. Which ironically is the one thing most people are too scared to do. Number two, they don't want their time diluted by mediocre minds. They don't want their time diluted by mediocre minds because for Sigmas, time isn't just precious, it's sacred. They think deeply, observe sharply, and question everything. So when they're forced into conversations that feel like a broken record of trends, clichés, or someone else's opinion dressed up as their own, they mentally check out. To a Sigma, that's not a conversation, it's intellectual junk food. And they're not about to feed their brain nonsense just to be polite. What really frustrates them is how many people speak without thinking. It's not just that they disagree, it's that there's no original thought behind the words. Everything sounds like it came from a tweet, a podcast, or some influencer's recycled philosophy. Sigmas notice the difference instantly. They're not looking for someone to agree with them, they're looking for someone who actually thinks. Someone who can challenge them with logic, not slogans. Someone who's not afraid to ask uncomfortable questions instead of parroting what's trending. That's why they'd rather spend 3 hours alone with a book than 10 minutes around people who contribute nothing new. Mediocrity in conversation feels like an insult. It's not about being snobbish, it's about self-respect. If you've trained your mind like a sharp blade, why waste it chopping through fog? If you've built clarity through solitude and critical thinking, why sit through shallow talk that scratches nothing but the surface? To Sigmas, words matter, ideas matter, depth matters. They want dialogue that makes their brain sit up, not slump over. If a conversation doesn't stretch their mind, it shrinks their energy. So when faced with people who recycle content like a broken algorithm, they won't argue or try to educate. They'll simply vanish, not out of cruelty, but because they value mental space the way others value social status. Sigmas don't seek superiority, they seek substance. And if you're not bringing any, they're not staying. Number 3, they can't unhear nonsense. They can't unhear nonsense, and that's not an exaggeration. It's a psychological reflex. Intelligent Sigmas process information on a deeper level than most, so when someone says something painfully dumb, it doesn't just roll off their back, it gets burned into their brain like a glitch in the system. And once it's in, it alters how they see you forever. One ignorant, careless, or wildly unexamined statement can make them lose complete respect in seconds. It's not about being judgmental. It's about being allergic to mental laziness. When someone speaks without thinking, spews out misinformation with confidence, or tries to sound smart using logic that doesn't even hold up in a cartoon, Sigmas don't argue. They just mentally check out. Their brain goes, so that's the level we're dealing with. And the door slams shut, quietly, permanently. It's not that Sigmas expect people to be perfect or have PhDs in every topic, but they do expect self-awareness, a basic sense of let me think before I speak, a little humility. When someone confidently delivers nonsense like it's gospel, it reveals more than stupidity. It reveals a complete lack of curiosity, and for Sigmas, curiosity is sacred. If you're not questioning the world, if you're not willing to be wrong, if you just throw words out for attention or approval, you're done in their book. What makes it worse is that the world rewards noise, not accuracy. Social media is full of people with loud opinions and zero insight. Sigmas notice who's talking just to talk and who's actually offering something real. They remember the nonsense, not to hold a grudge, but because it's a signal. This person's thought process is a liability. That's why once a Sigma hears something profoundly idiotic, something that shows the person has no intellectual discipline or depth, they don't try to fix it, debate it, or correct it. They just remove themselves quietly. No drama, no scene. Because to them, being surrounded by people who treat conversation like word vomit isn't just annoying, it's mentally claustrophobic. For Sigmas, nonsense is noise pollution. And once they hear it, they can't pretend they didn't. Number 4, they value privacy more than popularity. They value privacy more than popularity because to a Sigma, being known by everyone often means being misunderstood by most. Popularity demands exposure. Your thoughts, your moves, your relationships, even your mistakes become public property. That kind of life is suffocating for someone who thrives in self-possession. Sigmas don't want to be everyone's favorite person. They want to be free, free to move in silence, think without noise, and live without an audience breathing down their neck. Socializing, especially in this age of oversharing, turns your life into entertainment. You go to a dinner and suddenly your business is passed around like appetizers. Every little thing you do becomes a topic of discussion. People remember who you came with, what you wore, how you sounded, and they build narratives you never signed off on. For Sigmas, that's not just annoying, it's a violation. They're allergic to that kind of exposure. They don't want a trend, they want to disappear on their own terms. Control is everything to a Sigma, and social settings chip away at that control piece by piece. Someone tags them in a photo they didn't approve, repeats something they said out of context, or casually mentions details about their life to others. Now their privacy is collateral damage, and for someone who guards their inner world like a fortress, that kind of leak is enough to cut ties completely. It's not that they hate people, it's that they hate being accessible to people who haven't earned that access. Sigmas open up very selectively, and once something sacred is dragged into the open, it's no longer theirs. That loss of control over their own story is worse than being misunderstood. It's being misrepresented, and Sigmas don't tolerate that. Popularity thrives on visibility, but Sigmas thrive in mystery, in being unreadable, in not being reduced to a stereotype. They don't crave likes or attention. They crave silence, solitude, and the ability to vanish when they need to. Where others chase relevance, Sigmas chase peace. And if maintaining that peace means skipping the social circus entirely, They'll gladly choose invisibility over applause every single time. Number 5. They don't do emotional babysitting. They don't do emotional babysitting because Sigmas have zero tolerance for people who dump their unresolved mess into every interaction and expect applause for it. They've done the inner work. They've sat in silence, unpacked their baggage, taken accountability, and stitched their own emotional wounds without needing a crowd to cheer them on. So when someone shows up with their trauma on loudspeaker, demanding sympathy without self-awareness, Sigmas quietly back away, not because they lack empathy, but because they refuse to reward emotional laziness. These days, oversharing has become a weird form of currency. People bond over pain like it's a competition, using their trauma like a resume. But Sigmas see through it. They know the difference between genuine vulnerability and emotional theatrics. If someone's venting just to get validation with no intention of growing or changing, Sigmas tune out. They're not interested in playing therapist to people who treat self-destruction like a personality trait. What's worse is when emotionally chaotic people expect Sigmas to fix them, like it's their job to offer constant reassurance, manage moods, or absorb emotional blow-ups. Sigmas won't do it. They're not built for codependence. They're not emotionally available on demand. They value energy too much to waste it on someone who refuses to take responsibility for their inner chaos. And they won't sit through a trauma performance just to avoid looking cold. If you're doing the work, genuinely trying to grow, Sigmas respect that. They'll offer support. But if you're looking for an emotional pacifier or someone to carry your pain for you, they're not your person. Emotional maturity is the price of admission into a Sigma's inner world. If someone lacks that, they're shown the door, quietly and without apology. The world is full of people who confuse dumping for healing. Sigmas don't entertain that confusion. They've earned their peace, and they won't let anyone trample it with drama disguised as depth. They're not interested in being your emotional babysitter while you refuse to grow up. Either you handle your emotions like an adult, or you don't get access to theirs. Simple as that. Number 6. Everyone's pretending to be interesting. Everyone's pretending to be interesting. And Sigmas can smell the act from the moment someone opens their mouth. In today's world, being authentic has somehow been replaced with being marketable. People now talk like Twitter threads, share opinions they haven't earned, and wear quirky like a costume. Everyone's trying to be deep, unique, or edgy, but none of it feels real. It's all rehearsed. Sigmas don't want to engage with someone's curated personality. They want raw, unfiltered humanity. And sadly, most people are too busy performing to even know what that looks like anymore. What's exhausting for a Sigma is how much of modern conversation has turned into brand promotion. People list off their hobbies like job interviews, share their trauma for attention, or act mysterious just to appear cool. You've got people faking depth by quoting philosophers they don't understand, or pretending to be emotionally complex when they're just emotionally messy. It's like walking through a showroom full of mannequins that talk. Sigmas are mentally allergic to it. They want to know what someone really thinks, not what they think they should think. They want real opinions, even if they're unpopular. Real stories, even if they're messy. But most people are too terrified of being boring or wrong, so they hide behind trendy lingo, recycled hot takes, and whatever identity feels most socially acceptable that week. And the Sigma's brain? It checks out immediately. Sigmas crave honesty, not polish. They'd rather have an awkward but genuine conversation than a flawless one built on pretense. But try finding someone today who hasn't blurred the line between who they are and who they're trying to be. It's a performance 24/7. And Sigmas just aren't willing to clap for something that isn't real. What makes it worse is that the people doing the most performing are usually the ones begging to be seen. But how do you connect with someone who doesn't even know their own script is fake? Sigmas don't have the time or interest to peel back every layer of someone's self-created identity just to find a sliver of truth. They'll pass. Not out of arrogance, but because once a conversation feels like a one-person talent show, they're done. The real you is the only thing worth knowing. And if you buried it under glitter and sound bites, the Sigma's not sticking around to dig it up. Number 7, because they find themselves far more interesting than the crowd. Because they find themselves far more interesting than the crowd, Sigmas are rarely tempted by what most people call fun. While others chase validation, trends, and social buzz, Sigmas are too busy exploring the endless rabbit holes in their own mind. This isn't arrogance. It's just that they've built a whole universe inside themselves. They've questioned their own thoughts, challenged their beliefs, designed their values from scratch. So when a conversation revolves around gossip, superficial drama, or opinions that were clearly borrowed from someone's feed, it feels like trying to drink from an empty cup. Sigmas don't need stimulation from others because their mind is already doing the work. They're constantly analyzing, deconstructing, observing. They think in patterns, symbols, strategy, and subtlety. Every silence is a thought. Every thought leads to another insight. Their solitude isn't lonely, it's where they're most alive. So walking into a crowd of people who talk just to fill the air isn't refreshing, it's suffocating. Most people rely on others to reflect a version of themselves back at them. They need feedback, approval, laughs, attention. But Sigmas, they don't outsource their identity. They already know who they are, and more importantly, they like who they are. That makes them dangerous in social settings because they're immune to the bait most people bite. They don't need to be seen, liked, or heard just to feel whole. That kind of independence exposes how shallow most connections really are. It's not that they think no one is worth their time, it's that most people don't bring enough depth to spark any real curiosity. Sigmas aren't impressed by how many people you know, what you wore, or what you posted. They care about your contradictions, your quiet struggles, your ability to sit in silence and not panic. They want to talk about why you believe what you believe, not just what you believe. And that kind of conversation is rare. So when the options are hanging out with surface-level noise or sinking deeper into their own thoughts, the choice is already made. The crowd never stood a chance. Number 8. People expect instant intimacy without depth. People expect instant intimacy without depth, and to a Sigma, that's both bizarre and off-putting. The idea that a few casual chats, a shared meme, and some forced laughs automatically qualify someone for emotional access is something they just don't buy into. Sigmas are slow movers when it comes to connection, not because they're cold, but because they take authenticity seriously. They know that real trust, the kind that actually matters, is earned over time, not microwaved through fake bonding rituals. Most people are obsessed with the appearance of closeness. They want to call you their best friend before they even know your last name, or spill their entire life story in the first 30 minutes like it's a shortcut to intimacy. But for Sigmas, that's not depth. It's emotional fast food. It might fill the space, but it leaves them empty. They don't want pre-packaged vulnerability. They want the unspoken stuff, the contradictions, the raw truth, the parts of you that take time to reveal. And if someone can't sit with silence, nuance, or even discomfort without forcing a label or outcome, Sigmas quietly distance themselves. They also know that people who move too fast emotionally often don't stay consistent. Today's soul connection becomes tomorrow's ghoster. That's why Sigmas observe before they attach. They read patterns, not promises. They want to see how someone behaves when the excitement fades, when the mood changes, when no one's watching. If the bond can't survive without constant performance, it was never real in the first place. What makes this worse is that society has glamorized oversharing. People confuse dumping their traumas or secrets quickly as a sign of trust, but Sigmas see through that. If someone barely knows them yet starts crying about their past by coffee number 2, it doesn't feel deep, it feels performative. Like emotional intimacy is being used to skip the actual work of building real connection. Sigmas don't operate on that timeline. They might take weeks, months, or even longer before opening up. But when they do, it's solid, it's grounded, it's real. If someone wants instant closeness without the patience to earn it, they're not ready for a Sigma connection, and the Sigma will let them go without hesitation because illusions, even pretty ones, just aren't worth their time. Number 9, most conversations are status contests in disguise. Most conversations are status contests in disguise, and Sigmas see right through them. While everyone else is subtly flexing, comparing salaries, name-dropping connections, humble bragging about their crazy schedule, Sigmas are sitting there wondering when the conversation will evolve past the need to impress. It's not that they're annoyed by success, they just find the obsession with proving it exhausting. To them, connection should be about depth, not dominance. But the modern social script has turned almost every interaction into a veiled resume presentation. People rarely talk just to connect anymore. They talk to outshine. They don't listen. They wait for their turn to shine, to drop that one-liner, to prove they're doing better than you. And even the so-called deep talks are often peppered with status cues, whether it's who meditates more mindfully, who's traveling off-grid, or who read a life-changing book. There's usually a silent scoreboard running. Sigmas just aren't wired to play that game. They don't care what car you drive or how many plates you're spinning. If your self-worth depends on external validation, that's your prison, not their problem. Sigmas thrive in conversations where masks drop, where nobody's trying to be the loudest voice or the most impressive story, but finding that is rare, because the world has convinced people that their value lies in being seen as someone, not actually being someone. And so most social settings feel more like a silent competition than a human exchange. The Sigma can smell this dynamic within seconds, and once they detect it, they mentally check out. What makes them even more immune is that their confidence isn't built on external comparisons. They don't need applause, titles, or a highlight reel to feel whole. So when someone tries to flex in front of them, it falls completely flat. It's like trying to impress a monk with a Gucci belt. The Sigma might nod politely, but internally, they're done. They're not interested in power plays disguised as conversations. They're interested in minds, values, questions, the kind of talk that doesn't need a scoreboard. And until they find that, they'll gladly keep their silence. Because for them, a quiet mind is always more rewarding than a loud room full of people trying to win. Number 10, people interpret their honesty as cruelty. People interpret their honesty as cruelty because they've gotten too used to sugar-coated nonsense. Sigmas speak like scalpels, clean, precise, and without emotional frosting. They don't dress truth in warm fuzzies or package criticism in a compliment sandwich. They say what needs to be said, as it is. Not to hurt, but to clear the fog. But in a world addicted to emotional cushioning and watered-down truths, that kind of honesty sounds like violence. The real problem is that most people don't want truth. They want validation. They don't want clarity. They want comfort. So when a Sigma calls out the flaw in logic, the contradiction in behavior, or the delusion behind a decision, it's seen as personal. The listener bleeds ego, not because the Sigma was cruel, but because the truth struck a nerve no one else dared to touch. Sigmas aren't cruel. They're just unwilling to lie for the sake of harmony. They'd rather be disliked for saying something real than praised for playing along with delusions. That makes them a threat in social settings where people rely on politeness to mask dysfunction. Sigmas won't pretend your excuses make sense. They won't nod when you're clearly lost. And they won't bite their tongue when silence would be dishonest. But this brutal honesty isn't without purpose. Sigmas know that growth doesn't come from being coddled. It comes from being challenged. And if their words sting, it's often because they hit a truth no one else was brave enough to say. It's not about superiority. It's about integrity. They speak what they believe, not what others want to hear. And yes, this gets them labeled rude, cold, arrogant. But labels don't change the facts. They've simply accepted that telling the truth will never make them popular. They don't need applause. They need authenticity. So if their honesty costs them a few fragile egos, so be it. They weren't meant to be everyone's favorite. They were meant to be real in a world that's addicted to fake. Number 11, crowds amplify stupidity. Crowds amplify stupidity, and Sigmas know it all too well. They've seen how quickly individual thought gets hijacked the moment too many people start thinking as a unit. In a crowd, logic takes a back seat and performance takes the wheel. Everyone's too busy reacting, echoing each other, or trying to fit into the collective vibe to actually say or think anything worth hearing. Sigmas don't just find that annoying, they find it mentally suffocating. They've watched perfectly intelligent people dumb themselves down just to fit in. They've seen smart conversations derailed by the loudest idiot in the room while everyone nods like it's gospel. That's the thing about crowds. They don't filter nonsense, they multiply it. And Sigmas, they don't do echo chambers. They crave clarity, insight, truth. And you're not going to find that where everyone's too afraid to disagree or too eager to be liked. Groupthink to a Sigma is intellectual poison. The moment people start aligning their thoughts, not because they believe in something, but because they don't want to be the odd one out, the room becomes useless. Originality dies, nuance dies, and all that's left is a shallow soup of recycled opinions. That's why Sigmas avoid crowds, not out of fear, not out of snobbery, but out of a fierce need to protect their mental sharpness. They prefer solitude because it doesn't require compromise. In silence, they can think clearly without someone's emotional noise or trending opinion polluting the process. In a crowd, that's impossible. The noise is constant. The pressure to conform is subtle but relentless. And worst of all, most people in a crowd don't even realize they've stopped thinking for themselves. Sigmas aren't interested in being part of something if that something means trading clarity for comfort. They'll leave the mob to chase trends, cheer mediocrity, and drown in shallow unity. Meanwhile, they'll be somewhere else, sharpening their thoughts, refining their vision, and staying immune to the madness that starts the second too many people gather and stop questioning anything. To a Sigma, intelligence should challenge the room, not vanish inside it. Number 12, emotional manipulation is a party trick they don't fall for. Emotional manipulation is a party trick intelligent Sigmas never fall for, not because they're cold or indifferent, but because they see it coming from a mile away. Most people don't even realize how much of social interaction is drenched in silent control tactics. Fake compliments, guilt-tripping, passive-aggressive comments masked as jokes, or that subtle emotional blackmail that sounds like, "You never show up anymore. Everyone's asking about you." That's not concern, it's coercion. And Sigmas don't play games they didn't sign up for. Sigmas are emotionally fluent in a way most people aren't. They don't just listen to what's being said. They pick up on tone, body language, motives, and energy. So when someone tries to use guilt or manipulation to rope them into doing something, it doesn't make them feel obligated. It makes them feel repelled. The moment they detect emotional strings being pulled, they mentally cut the cord and start backing away. What makes them so resistant is that Sigmas value autonomy more than approval. They don't need to be liked. They don't need to fit in. And they definitely don't need validation from people who use emotional tricks to get their way. That makes them dangerous to manipulators because the usual weapons don't work. You can't shame a Sigma into showing up. You can't flatter them into compliance. You can't guilt them into staying in a relationship, a conversation, or a setting that feels off. They see right through it, and they don't hesitate to walk away. Most social events are a minefield of emotional power plays, and Sigmas feel it. From people fishing for compliments to others subtly trying to control the vibe or conversation, there's often a hidden agenda underneath the surface. Sigmas don't find that charming. They find it mentally exhausting. They don't want to decode hidden meanings or navigate fake warmth. They'd rather just stay home, recharge, and spend time in truth, even if it's just their own company. The truth is, Sigmas crave sincerity, not forced smiles or over-polished social masks, but realness. So when they step into an environment that feels emotionally manipulative, they shut down, not because they can't handle it, but because they refuse to participate. They're not cold, they're just immune to the performance. In a world that never stops talking, Sigma individuals are the ones who choose silence. Not out of shyness, but out of sharp discernment. They aren't allergic to people. They're allergic to noise masquerading as connection. Socializing, for most, is a way to feel seen, validated, entertained. But for Sigmas, it's an environment full of traps. Emotional leeches, shallow interactions, groupthink, fake depth, and endless performances. And when your mind operates with laser-like precision, when your soul craves truth over theatrics, being around all that isn't stimulating, it's suffocating. Every word Sigmas speak has weight. Every connection they make is filtered through intense scrutiny. They don't engage just to pass time. They engage when there's value, and that's exactly what sets them apart. In a sea of constant chatter, Sigmas are the rare ones who pause, who question, who observe. While most are busy trying to be interesting, they're busy being interested in authenticity, in depth, in things most people avoid, because they're too raw, too real, too uncomfortable. But here's the twist. Sigmas aren't antisocial. They're selectively social. They don't avoid people, they avoid pretense. They don't hate conversations, they hate pointless ones. They can sit in silence for hours and feel full, while others need constant stimulation just to feel alive. And while society might label this as distant or cold, it's actually the highest form of self-respect. They know their energy is currency, and they refuse to invest it where there's no return. So if you ever catch a Sigma alone, don't assume they're lonely. That's silence you're witnessing. That's clarity in action. That's solitude. That's freedom. While the world is busy chasing attention, they're chasing understanding. While others are drowning in the noise of social obligation, Sigmas are sipping peace like fine wine, unbothered, undistracted, and utterly uninterested in the circus of superficiality. The truth is, intelligent Sigmas don't hate people, they just refuse to dilute their brilliance to fit into the chaos. And that's not arrogance, that's evolution. Because in a world where everyone is trying to be loud, the quiet mind remains undefeated. If this hit home or cracked a few uncomfortable truths, don't just scroll away in silence. Hit that subscribe button and join a space where real minds gather. Smash the like button if you value depth over drama. Drop a comment and tell us, what's the biggest reason you avoid socializing? We read everything. And hey, if you've got a fellow Sigma or someone who seriously needs to understand you better, share this video with them. This isn't just content, it's a mindset. Stick around. There's more where this came from.